CES 2019 is drawing to a close, but it's a future event involving Samsung that actually has people talking. I'm Karen Roby here with ZDNet Editor-in-Chief Larry Dignan. Larry, just right out of the gate here, when it comes to smartphones, the pressure, it's now really on Samsung.
Yeah, Samsung on February 20th is going to outline their Galaxy S10 launch, which, if you followed the smartphone industry, iPhone demand's down, Samsung issued a revenue and profit warning, and a lot of it had to do with chips due to smartphones, but you can also extrapolate that and think, that their smartphone demand has been down too. And generally speaking, smartphones are like the new computers, right? You don't have to upgrade them all the time. The innovation cadence is slower. And right now, we're all kind of in the stasis where we're waiting for 5G, we're waiting for foldable phones, we're waiting for something to upgrade for. And so here comes Samsung with this S10 launch, and honestly, it's going to have to be the Jesus phone. It's going to have to be something that kind of saves the day and gives us, renews our faith in the smartphone industry and all that. My hunch is that it's all too early and they're going to wind up pre-announcing something that's going to make us wait even longer. So Samsung has a lot of pressure and a lot of challenges with this launch coming up.
All right, and talk specifically about the S10. What is it that, design-wise, cost, what are we looking at here? What are you seeing?
Well, since the Galaxy line is now, they're on their 10th model, right? So they're going to have something splashy. And if you look at the Galaxy S9, it didn't fare as well, right? Because it was very incremental upgrades. And right now, tech buyers, they're not in the mood to spend thousands of dollars on smartphones that only offer you incremental things. So I think that's the challenge, right? Because 5G is coming towards the end of 2019 and all those phones will be out then. And then you're also looking at situations where Samsung keeps teasing this foldable phone. So if there's a Galaxy S10 that isn't foldable, I think we're probably going to hold off, right? I mean, so it's sort of a weird thing. And the other thing to note about Samsung is they have the Galaxy S10 launch in like February, wintertime, basically in the US. And then they do the Note launch in the summer. And the Note is really their flagship brand. So since they don't do all these three at the same time, it always gives you this pause about the Galaxy launches where you're kind of like, well, do I just wait? Right? Am I more interested in the Note? Is the Note the real flagship? And this is sort of a warm-up act? And that's always, I own a Note and I always look at the Galaxy S launches and I go, oh, that's interesting. But I'm waiting for a Note or to see what that is at least. So Samsung has this really weird cadence. And I would say it's even more weird now given 5G, foldable screens, and all these developments that we know are coming, but may not just be ready for prime time yet. So given the malaise in the smartphone sector, Samsung has a big challenge here. And we'll see if they live up to it or not.
Yeah, and Larry, typically at CES, that seems the phones don't get a lot of love, but Samsung certainly slid in here with this announcement, getting some of the spotlight for it. So they're certainly setting themselves up for this big event. But has there been any talk about the cost or where this price point will come in?
No, well, we know the current Note, the Note 9 is it'll cost you anywhere from $1,200 to 14, I think, well equipped, or ridiculously equipped. And, the XS Max, that thing's pushing 1,400 now, right? Like these prices are really getting high. They're basically laptop computers now. The Galaxy S launch is, they're probably a little lower than that. But I think both Samsung and Apple, they've sort of figured out they're hitting that top of the pricing range. So I think there's only so much higher they can really go. And that's what gets interesting. What's a foldable screen cost? It's not going to be cheap, right? It's going to be really cool, but it's not going to be cheap. So that's the balancing act Samsung's got to do. And it's just going to be fascinating to watch. Not necessarily because of it's about so much more than just the Samsung product that they're launching. There's a whole industry and there's a lot of dynamics there. And the Chinese carriers like Huawei, Oppo, and those guys, they're giving you really good competitive devices for a third of the cost in some cases, half the cost in some cases. So it gets really tricky. So this launch comes at a very interesting time. And Samsung's got to know this, right? Because they're teeing it up during CES, which is, allows them to get going on the news cycle a bit and sort of take some of the oxygen out of the room. So we'll see how it plays out. But I do think there's a lot of challenges there for Samsung coming up, and we'll see how it goes on February 20th.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And with the smartphone industry and just in general, Larry, kind of what are your thoughts on where we stand right now and factoring in Apple?
I think Apple will continue to do fine. The problem with Apple is it's a premium brand and they're trying to get in these other price points. And, you see this with some of the automakers, right? Like a BMW. Do you really want that premium top of the line one, or do you want that cheap one? Or not cheap, or cheaper? And that's what Apple's kind of running into, right? It's a luxury brand. And then when you try to go lower, you're like, it's kind of tricky. So I think Apple's problems are Apple's by itself. And then you have Samsung, which is fighting all these Android device makers, and it's just a different ballgame, right? I mean, it's a race to the bottom. And then you have the whole tech buyer part of the equation where carrier subsidies are gone, right? So you're actually really paying the full price for these devices. And that causes everybody to think differently, right? Like, I don't think you don't have that automatic upgrade every 2 years when you're actually paying full freight. So the decision is it's more like a car, right? Do you lease a phone or do you buy it outright and then pay it off and then ride it for a few years before you need something more? And I think we're just seeing that buying part and that buying calculus that, that's just starting to play out. And I think that's the other reason you're seeing demand slow, because it's sort of like you took away the punch bowl for those subsidies. And when people are paying full freight, it's different. And it's the same thing with corporate upgrade cycles too, right? For companies that are, buying devices for their workers, it's the same story, right? They're not going to spend that much on a phone. Like you're going to have to really justify these really pricey phones. They're going to pick some mid-tier model, and that's what you're going to get. So I think this is all combining with, plus we also know we're all going to need 5G phones like next year or later this year. So when you're doing that, there's so many reasons to wait that I think the whole industry is sort of caught in the crossfire here because, what if the Galaxy S10, I assume it's going to be 5G, it's going to have to be, but what if it's not? Who's buying it, right? And that's kind of there's so many of those questions that are here. So it's, the Samsung launch is going to be interesting for not just Samsung, for the whole industry.
Yeah, absolutely. All eyes on the 20th there for that announcement and for the unveiling of that. And we'll be watching. And Larry, of course, you will be as well. And we appreciate your insight on this. And for more, stick with ZDNet, CNET, and Tech Republic.